Hello everyone, welcome to the series of CUET PG B.Ed, where we learn about various topics of B.Ed. For today's topic, we'll go with the basics of teaching. So I'll quickly brief you up with what this video will be about before we start the actual video. So we learn about teaching, its meaning, process, nature, and characteristics. And in the meanwhile, we'll also learn about teaching aptitude versus teaching attitude. Then we have the teaching learning process, who all are involved in this teaching learning process, what is the nature of teaching, and what are the characteristics of teaching. So let's start this video. Okay, so what actually is teaching? Teaching is the art and science of knowledge. It is the means through which knowledge is imparted to the learners. It involves transaction of knowledge, skills, and content. Okay, it also involves use of effective strategies and techniques for efficient transfer of information. So it may or may not involve the use of a proper structured lesson plan. Why? Because I'll tell you, as teachers, we cannot predict what we are going to teach in our classes. Obviously, we can give a brief idea of what the video is going to be about, or what the class is going to be about, what the lecture is going to be about, but we cannot give a proper structured lesson plan. Okay, so I have written that it may or may not involve the use of a proper structured lesson plan, but it is necessary for teaching to have the following desired components. A teacher, which means givers of knowledge and information, and students who are at the receiving end of information. Then we have the content, okay, and the methods and strategies deployed for delivering that content. Okay, so moving on, we have the types of environment where this teaching occurs. So first we have a formal environment, which involves the use of a proper structured lesson plans and delivery of content and a proper assessment strategy. Okay, so you can find this kind of environment usually in schools where the teacher has to prepare a proper lesson plan of what the class is going to be about. And they have to follow a proper assessment criteria. Okay, then we have an informal environment where we do not follow a rigid and a structured pattern, and it usually takes place in informal settings like some internship, some workshop, or some mentorship, mentor-mentee program kind of thing. Okay, moving on, we'll talk about teaching aptitude versus teaching attitude. Okay, so in this slide, we'll talk about teaching aptitude versus teaching attitude. So what does teaching aptitude refer to? So teaching aptitude refers to the inherent skills and abilities that a teacher must hold in order to make the teaching more interactive and sound. So what are competencies and what are skills are we talking about? Let's see. Firstly, we are talking about the communication skills. So a teacher should have a one-to-one communication with their students. A proper formal discourse must take place. So I'll mention some words that we'll use a lot in our coming videos. So firstly, we'll talk a lot about discourse. Okay, so what is discourse? Discourse is basically a conversation happening in a formal setup. So a formal setup can be a classroom or some conference or some any kind of conversation happening in a formal setup is called as discourse. So a teacher should be in a one-to-one discourse with their students, and the students should be in a fearless environment. So what is a fearless environment? Fearless environment is where a student is not hesitating to speak up in the classroom. Okay, then only they can be in a good communication with their teacher. Okay, then this word that we have, pedagogical content knowledge. So what is pedagogical content knowledge? We'll also use this word a lot in our further videos. So it is important to understand the meaning of this word. This word is made up of two things basically. Sorry, three words. This whole word pedagogical content knowledge is made up of three words. As we can see, it is made up of pedagogy. The word pedagogical is made up of pedagogy, then we have content, and then we have knowledge. So pedagogy is basically means the way you teach. Okay, so now different subjects have their way of teaching. For example, language, there's a certain way you teach the subjects of language. Then there is a certain way you teach the subjects of social science. And then there is a certain way you teach the subject of mathematics. Okay, so every subject has their own way of approaching. Okay, so this pedagogy means teaching. The way you teach means pedagogy, or use of strategies, use of different methods will come under pedagogy only. Then we have content and knowledge. So content is very easy to decode, and content means the content that you're teaching, and knowledge. So when you're teaching a certain subject, for example, if I'm a teacher of English language, so there's a certain way I'll teach English language in my classroom. Okay, then there are some methods. For example, the LSRW methods, where I approach the subject through the listening skills first, then the speaking skills first, uh, followed by R, reading skills, then finally the W, which means I'll teach writing skills. Okay, so this is the pedagogical content knowledge for English subject. Similarly, we have pedagogical content knowledge for social sciences, pedagogical content knowledge for sciences. Okay, so this by the word pedagogical content knowledge, we can also refer it to as PCK. Okay, so it is made up of, as we talked about, it is made up of three words: pedagogy, content, and knowledge. And together it goes like this. So then we have the instructional design and delivery. What do we mean by instructional design and delivery? Instructional design and delivery basically means the curriculum that we have, the curriculum or the syllabus that we have. Okay, and delivery means how we are transacting that thing. Transaction. It basically deals with transaction. Okay, so as we talked about, there should be a proper syllabus, a proper content is required for every subject, for every program, for every paper. And every paper, every subject uses their different strategies and techniques. Okay, then we have the classroom management. What do we mean by classroom management? Okay, so while teaching, it is very important for students to have a proper sitting area, a proper sitting arrangement with well ventilated and well lit classrooms. Only then sound teaching can take place, because learners will be involved in a one-to-one discourse, a one-to-one communication. They'll be in one-to-one communication with their teachers. So it is really important for students as well as teachers to have a proper classroom. Okay, and then we have to promote the technique of self-discipline. Self-discipline is really necessary, where the learners understand that it is in their own will to learn the subject. So the teacher should not be the kind of person who just comes in class and is very strict with everything, is very strict with the classroom environment. There is no open one-to-one discourse. Students fear to talk in the classroom. So it is really important for teacher to maintain the concept of self-discipline. I mention it here. It is self-discipline, well-lit. Then we also talked about well-lit classrooms. Okay, finally, we have adaptability and flexibility. What do we mean by adaptability and flexibility? The teacher should be adaptable to individual needs of learners. Every learner has their individual needs. Okay, individual pace. Now, when I say individual pace, what do I mean by individual pace? Individual pace, like some learners can understand the same thing immediately. Some learners can understand the same thing in one or two more classes or one or two more days. Okay, so it is really important to acknowledge the different individuality that the learners hold in the classroom, the diversity that the learners hold in the classroom. Okay, it is really important. Then teaching attitude. We talked about teaching aptitude. It is the next thing that comes in is teaching attitude. Teaching attitude refers to the mindset and emotional competencies of the teacher. Earlier, we talked about the skills and competencies that the teacher must possess. And here we are talking about the mindset and emotional competencies. So what are we actually dealing with? We are actually dealing with mindset and emotional competencies. We are talking about covert behavior. Now, when I say covert behavior, I mean the behavior which is invisible. Every individual has two kinds of behavior. One is overt. Overt behavior is the behavior which is visible upon the individual, and then we have the covert behavior which is invisible. Okay, so being a teacher, I have some moral values. I have some core mindset which makes me a better teacher. Okay, so what are these? What are these? We'll discuss. First one is enthusiasm. Then we have motivation. Again, this motivation can be of two types: intrinsic, one which comes from within. I'm intrinsically motivated to teach the students right now. So I'm driven by my internal core values and the internal morals that I have. So I'll teach you based on these intrinsic values that I have. Then we have some extrinsic values. Extrinsic values generally refers to some rewards or some kind of punishments. Okay. Some students fear that if they won't speak in the class, they'll get punished, or some kind of, oh, okay, good academic record is also extrinsic. So scoring good marks. Okay. If students learn today in class, they'll score good marks. So these are all the kind of extrinsic motivation that the learners can possess. Okay. Then we have empathy and understanding. Okay, now we need to understand the difference between empathy and sympathy. Okay, empathy involves actions. The only difference between empathy and sympathy is that empathy involves actions. So sympathy does not involve action. So as a teacher, we should be empathetic towards the learners. We should be empathetic to create a desired change through our teaching in the mindset of the learners. Okay, so that is what empathy means. And only when we understand our learners, then only we can be empathetic towards them. When we understand that every learner has their own individuality, every learner has their own individual needs and demands, then only we can be empathetic towards the needs of learners. Okay, then finally, we have self-reflection. What does self-reflection mean? Reflection basically means introspection. So when I'm saying self-reflection or reflection, I mean that I'm introspecting into my own teaching. After the class or after the lecture, I'm introspecting into my own teaching, and then I'm looking into it and making certain amends so my teaching can be more effective. That is what we mean by self-reflection. Okay, proceeding on, we have the teaching learning process. So what is the teaching learning process? It is in general, it involves a systematic interaction between the teachers and the students with the help of the content available, the materials, and the desired skills of the teachers. Okay, so I've also mentioned a little diagram over here where the teaching learning process is nothing but a desired interaction between teachers, students, and the curriculum. So we'll also see the steps that are involved. So preparation of the lesson plan, and as we talked about, it is not necessary to have a proper structured lesson plan. So here we can replace this step with laying out of content. We can just present a small idea of what the content is going to be or what the class is going to be, and we are good to go. Okay, then we have presentation of lesson and content and use of various strategies and materials. So when we lay out the content, we'll see how what various strategies we can use in our process. Then we have interaction. Finally, the interaction part is taking place where we are transacting knowledge using contents and material developed. Okay. Then comes the application. So application is the part where the learners come in. Okay. The learners come in from this part where we give them opportunities to apply and practice what they have learned. Then the feedback. So here teachers are involved in a one-to-one process, individualized. It is better to have individualized feedback. So again, we are not generalizing it. The place we are teaching may or may not have the system of individualized feedback, but it is always better to have individualized kind of feedback. Okay. Um, so through individualized feedback, we'll understand learner strengths and weaknesses, and even the learners will get to know about the strengths and weaknesses and areas where they can strengthen their strengths. Okay. Then finally comes the reflection part. Here a teacher will introspect into their own teaching and make certain required amendments. Okay. So the required amendments will be made by the teacher after reflection into their own teaching. Okay. Okay. So now comes nature of teaching. So nature of teaching involves the principles, the philosophy, and the psychology of teaching. So it mainly involves the following: dynamic interaction. What do we mean by dynamic interaction? Dynamic interaction means one-to-one interaction. So it does not only mean one-to-one interaction, but an interaction where we have fearlessness. What do we mean by fearlessness? We talked about classroom discourse. Okay, so we also talked about how it is important for a classroom environment to have a fearless environment where the learner can interact freely with the teacher without any fear of being right or being wrong. Okay, so often learners hesitate in the classroom because they fear that they might be wrong. So there is no such thing as right or wrong. The learner should be encouraged to speak in the classroom. So that is what we mean by dynamic interaction. Then the classroom should have engaging tasks, obviously, various tasks some activity methods, some hands-on experiments, then field trips, debates. All such things should be encouraged while teaching content, while taking up different areas, while taking up extracurricular. All these things should be encouraged. Then we have adaptability. We talked about how a teacher should be open to various learners' needs, the individual learners' needs, individual needs and demands. Okay, so teachers should be adaptable to those needs as well. The lesson plan or the layout of the content that you have presented or the techniques that you're using in classroom should be adaptable to and should cater to the needs of every learners in that classroom. Okay, so then we have the holistic process. What do we mean by holistic? The word holistic means overall growth and well-being also. So teaching should be a holistic process. It should not be a fixed process where the teachers are following some rigid, structured lesson plans and structured guidelines. They should be open and flexible to everything, to every process, so that it caters to overall growth and well-being of the learners as well as teachers. Okay. Then it is very important to have contextualization in teaching. What is contextualization? Contextualization does means localization. So if I am a person from Northeast or Northeast of India, and if the teaching that I'm doing caters to some other part of India, for example, the northern part of India or the southern part of India, it will be very difficult for me to relate to the content that I'm being taught to. So it is really important to have contextualization. Okay, so the textbook should also have contextualization so that the learners are able to relate to the examples given, to the content given. Okay. So that is what we mean by contextualization. Then again, flexibility. Adaptability and flexibility go together. Um, Flexible to learners' needs and integrating various strategies also. So, for example, in the world of teaching, currently, in the current scenario, we have the integration of technology as one of the major revolutionary changes in the world of teaching. So a teacher should be open to integrating technology in their classroom and should not hesitate away. So it is true that we cannot function without technology. Even in conventional classrooms, right now what we are doing is the online kind of teaching. But even in conventional classroom, it is important for a teacher to integrate in technology. So you cannot escape away. But obviously, there's flexibility in using technology. Sometimes you can jump onto the conventional method, and sometimes you can integrate technology. So that kind of flexibility a teacher can possess. So that is what flexibility is. Finally, we have diversity and inclusion. So, as a teacher or as to be teachers, it is really important to understand this word diversity and inclusion. What do we mean by diversity? Diversity means when we say India is a diverse country, we mean that every 5 kilometer the culture changes, every 5 kilometer the language changes. So exact kind of diversity exists in our classrooms also. We have students from different social backgrounds. We have students from all kind of castes. We have students from all kind of classes. We have students from all kind of religion, and we have students who speak all kind of language. So it is really important to cater to that diversity. Okay. And similarly, like we talked about individuality also. Every learner has their own kind of personality, their own intelligence, their own individual pace and speed. So a teacher should be open to inculcating that kind of diversity in classroom. Similarly, that's what we mean by inclusion also. So often learners have some kind of learning disability or some kind of special disability. So a teacher should also be open to include that kind of diversity in classroom. Okay, that is what we mean by diversity and inclusion. Then we talk about communication skills. Okay, sorry, characteristics of teaching, finally. So what do we mean by characteristics of teaching? It involves facilitation of teaching as it requires skills to impart already existing knowledge. So, what do we mean by characteristics of teaching? Earlier, nature of teaching was dealing with the principles, the philosophy, and the psychology. Here we are talking about the imparting of already existing knowledge. So for that, we require a set of skills and abilities. And what are these skills and abilities? Firstly, we have communication skills. And communication skills, as I said, it is really important to have a one-to-one communication of students and the teachers, and an environment where we have fearless environment. Okay, then it is really important to have an apt pedagogical content knowledge. If the teacher lacks pedagogical content knowledge, then the teaching cannot go sound. The teaching cannot be effective if the teacher does not have appropriate pedagogical content knowledge of their subject. Okay, then we have empathy. We talked about the difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy versus sympathy. A teacher should be empathetic and not just sympathetic. Uh, it is really important to understand that actions will only bring desired changes through your teaching within the learners. It's not just sympathy that goes. So empathy is really important. Then we have effective planning and organization of content and tasks. It is really important to lay out your topics, uh, laying out of content. Okay. By this, I also mean the teacher should come prepared in their classroom. And by prepared, I do not mean a proper lesson plan. The teacher should come prepared by reading what they have to teach in the classroom. They just cannot stand up and come in the classroom, because it is really important to manage time. So you have a desired time, like we have 1 hour or we have 40 minutes for the classroom. So you cannot waste the learner's time. Okay, so for that, a teacher has to have proper, a teacher should be punctual. When I say that, then time management comes with punctuality. It is really important for the teacher to have proper time management. They cannot they cannot come unprepared for the classroom. You cannot waste the learner's time when it comes to being a good teacher. Then classroom practice. Some classroom practices that the teacher must follow is like individuality that we talked about. Uh, Giving importance to learners' individuality, inclusion, creating a democratic environment where the learners and teachers are the learners basically are fearless when it comes to having an open communication with the teacher. Then finally, we have the reflective practice. Okay, where the teachers can actually introspect into the learning and make certain amends on how their learning can be effective. We'll just quickly revise what we learned in today's classroom. Firstly, we learned about what is teaching, who all are required to have desired components in teaching. Then we talked about the formal environment versus the informal environment and the rigidity that both holds. Then we talked about teaching aptitude versus teaching attitude. Teaching aptitude is more skill-based and competency-based. It involves skills of teachers like communication skills, pedagogical content knowledge, classroom management, adaptability, and flexibility. Then we talked about teaching attitude. Teaching attitude refers to mindset and emotional competencies of the teacher. It includes enthusiasm, motivation, empathy, self-reflection. Then we talked about the whole teaching learning process, the steps involved in the teaching learning process, the application, feedback, the reflection. Then nature of teaching, obviously, it deals with the principles, philosophy, and psychology of teaching. It has dynamic interaction, engaging tasks, adaptability, the holistic process, contextualization. These are all the terms that we need to understand because they'll be used a lot in our future videos. And if we actually get into this CUET be these are the terms which are actually required to understand because these are very general terms when it comes to the world of teaching. Then we have characteristics of teaching. We have communication skills, one-to-one communication, again, pedagogical content knowledge, empathy versus sympathy, then effective planning and organization of content, classroom practice, and finally the reflective practice. So that was all about today's class. These are the basics of the teaching world. Then in the next class, we'll learn about the learning. And moving on, it will be a good one-to-one interaction, I feel. And so that is it for today's class. We'll meet in the next class. Bye-bye. Take care.